World News from the Sydney Opera House. A panel of international speakers take part in the Intelligence Squared debate. Here on BBC World News.
Welcome to the Sydney Opera House. It's the home of the Festival of Dangerous Ideas and the venue for the first of the BBC World News Intelligence Squared debates coming from Australia. My name's Simon Longstaff and I am your host. Now, we've gathered here today to apply an intellectual blowtorch to the belly of one of the most cherished ideas of Western civilisation when we debate the motion that democracy is not for everyone. Apart from the audience of around 850 people here, we have a fantastic panel of national and international speakers. And now speaking against the motion, a former Philippine Cabinet Minister, Amina Rasul.
Thank you, Simon, for inviting me to this most impressive and scary forum. When I was listening to our distinguished opponents talk about why democracy is not for everyone but should be, I could not help but relate to who I am. I am a Muslim from Mindanao. I grew up in a small island which is now better known as a hotbed for terrorists called the Abu Sayyaf. I'm a member of nobility. I actually had two grand-aunts married to two sultans. So I should be very happy with a different form of government. However, I did have my childhood under a democracy and saw how our people flourished under a democracy. I was a teenager when martial law came and took democracy away, and I saw how oppressive that was for all peoples, especially for Muslim minorities. And then I witnessed the coming back of democracy when President Aquino supported people power. And I saw how we flourished all over again under a democratic form of government. So when they say that democracy is not for everyone, I'm wondering who is the everyone that they're referring to? Could it possibly be me, this Muslim woman from a small island, conflict-affected, the subject of the war on terror? When people say democracy is not for everyone, they usually think of communism and Islam and the Muslim states. If we define democracy as liberal democracy with human rights and freedom, then we can point to Islamic countries that uphold liberal rights like Indonesia and Turkey. Now, if we look at women's participation as an indicator of women's rights and therefore as an indication of democratization, Turkey, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Pakistan have elected women heads of states. There are 800 million Muslims who live in democratic states. Indonesia, the largest Muslim majority country with some 200 million Muslims, is a democracy and grappling with issues of governance, corruption, human rights, just like any other democratic state. And yet, 20 years ago, the world despaired over the corrupt authoritarian government of Indonesia, assuming that this was normal, understandable, given that Indonesia was a Muslim majority country, pretty much like Iraq and Afghanistan. Look at Indonesia now. It is the strongest democracy in ASEAN, working on its own internal problems in as democratic a fashion as you do here in Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, just because you are in transition and have to grapple with very serious issues of strengthening democratization, of protecting human rights, of having freedom of the press, and having strong civil society, it does not mean that democracy is not for you. It only means that we have to work harder at making sure that the democratic processes that we want will indeed govern us. As they say, vigilance is the price of democracy. Thank you.
My name's Ben Teal. My sympathies go out to the affirmative. It must sting that your success or failure in this debate will be decided by democratic vote. However, some of your comments do have merit, unfortunately, to the wrong question. They have merit if the question being asked is whether democracy is not for everyone right now. You've provided examples of failings of particular states, classes of society, or individuals in them. I'll be a little sympathetic to your side. I will give you this vote if you can name for me a country or a geographic region, a cultural, a tribal or some sort of ethnic group, a city-state, or hell, even a class in a society where democracy is not for them, but, not right now, but never will be for them. I throw this to the affirmative. Name me one of those, and you will have this vote.
Okay. It's a direct challenge to the affirmative. Can you name one society, one state, one organisation that will never get democracy and should not? I think that's the question. Yes. Anyway, Greg Craven, can you think of one?
Well, I guess
Vatican?
Sorry.
Sorry. I may have got you one vote, that's all.
I won't hazard a guess at New South Wales. That would be unfair. I think, frankly, you can respond to that kindly or unkindly. The kind version is that's a very, very silly question. The real issue is how many places can you look at now and say they've never, ever had democracy and there's no sign of it coming round the corner? Because you can't prove a negative, but you can use your own eyes.
Amina, do you want to respond to this?
I really cannot imagine any state now that has never been, that's not a democracy and is not moving towards it. If you're looking at the monarchies in the Arab world, over the past 5 years, they have been moving, although very slowly, I may add, but they have been moving towards a more democratic frame for government. Saudi Arabia very recently had a deputy minister who is female, finally appointed. In Kuwait, they have elected women to parliament. So the move is towards more democratic forms of government. And it seems to me like we are all hung up here on the problems of democratization. And isn't that precisely why it is so good to belong to a form of government called democracy? Because it allows you to rectify, it allows you corrective mechanisms so that you can attain the ideals of a democratic state. If I were in an authoritarian regime, as we were during the martial law days, this gathering would not be possible. I cannot possibly be speaking here, and there would be no chance of reforms being implemented. John.
Do you want to make a brief comment? Yes.
Find your news wherever you live at bbc.com/.